Week 12 cultural playoff scenarios here. So here are the ESPN right now, according to Allstate predictions right now on their percentage, which is right now 10 teams now. Two of those teams have really no shot. So really in this scenario, it's 8. But here's some scenarios that are some to happen, and also two like random ones that are just like fun to look at. So for here to look at though, we have basically an SEC team is locked in, and a Big Ten team. Now, I think a Pac-12 team is locked in at this point. If Washington, Oregon are to both went out and play conference, so most likely then that third or fourth option, whatever place they are, is going to be either an SEC, ACC, or Big 12 team, depending on what happens. So, and that's what I think the latter order is here. This is the most likely scenario, in my opinion. Here we have Georgia wins out, Ohio State also wins out, Florida State wins out, but Oregon wins in the Pac-12 championship, into which what bumps them up to number 4. And then we see Texas barely not make it. So that right there is most likely scenario here, in my opinion here. So another one is Ohio. This is if Bama beats Georgia and Oregon beats Washington here now, because that's very crucial. And I'll go over another one, because if Ohio, and that could be Michigan too for Ohio State. This could make an interesting one. Bama wins. Now you can see Bama will probably jump Oregon and Texas just because of that win over Georgia. So that's what I think. But things will get interesting right here though. Or not yet, but I'll show you. So this right here is a scenario of Michigan wins now instead of Ohio State. What if? So here it is. There's Bama and Georgia with that too. So here's another one. If the team just went out, Ohio State wins out, you have this. I think Washington would be over Florida State, as Washington has more. You can argue Washington has more of a tougher schedule, or I mean, not tougher schedule, but better wins than Florida State, as their resume, in my opinion, is better. Not saying Washington's a better football team, but in terms of resume, Washington has it. If we look at their schedule, they have a lot of ranked wins right now. Starting out right now, they have great wins against teams like Arizona, Oregon, USC, sort of, or Utah is going to be one. Utah is one. Then Oregon State, if they pull it off this week, and then Pac-12 championship, and then we got Texas. They're number 5. Florida State's and Ohio State and Georgia are kind of self-explanatory. And so here's the one. Then Texas gets in. The way Texas gets in is if Washington loses to Oregon State, okay? Because then that would knock them out probably. And then Washington beats Oregon Pac-12 championship. Now, Texas probably going to get over Washington at that point. So Texas needs Washington to lose here this week for them to make it in, and then for them to beat Oregon in Pac-12 championship if they're both there. Now this is a scenario where things get tough. Is Bama beats Georgia, but Washington, Florida State, and Ohio State all went out. Because what do you do in that situation? Because Georgia is about to repeat, but what do you do? Because do you put Alabama in and then Georgia gets ripped off, Or do you knock out like a Florida State or Washington team, even though they're undefeated still? And I think that's where it'd be really tough. The playoff committee here is if Bama wins, but no one else loses coming in here. So they could either put Georgia in, which I think is highly unlikely. They could do Bama in, or straight up kick out Florida State or Washington, which that just doesn't seem like it would go well with people, but who knows what the playoff committee would do. But I feel like you can comment down below what you think, because I honestly have no idea what they would do, and this is what I fear might happen. But Washington's not looking good enough to win against Oregon in a rematch of the Pac-12 championship if those two teams meet up. So it's not that much to worry about. And here's a scenario where Oregon State gets in because they were shown 1% chance. So in the scenario, Georgia, Ohio State went out, but you have Louisville upsetting Florida State. Oregon State this week beats Washington. That moves them up some. Then they get that win against Oregon. Then they win the Pac-12 championship. This is the only way I see them getting in. You have Florida State lose, and then Washington, and Oregon. Obviously, they both lose Oregon State, so that's the only way I see them getting in. I mean, that would be cool, right? And here's the scenario where Louisville gets in, Louisville wins. We see what happens is Oregon and Washington, Pac-12 basically beats up on each other. Michigan. So what happens is Alabama loses. Now you have a rematch. You have Michigan in here too. It's the only other one-loss team. Louisville gets put in at number 3 just because they don't want Michigan, Ohio State playing again. Here's the scenario where I think it would be really cool to see happen. Is if basically Georgia, so Ohio State loses, okay, to Iowa. Or if Ohio State wins out and then play Big Ten championship, they lose to Iowa. And Georgia loses to Bama. Now, look, this looks kind of not. This would be really cool, in my opinion, playoff. Because you got Texas and Georgia, and then you got Alabama, Ohio State, which would, in my opinion, be really fun to watch. But again, probably not going to happen. This is a scenario. If Bama is going to get first. Bama needs everyone to lose, basically. And then they would, they beat Georgia, they get that number 1 spot. If Ohio State lost 2, so you have Bama, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia. Then there's the Florida State going first, where basically everyone else has to lose except for them. Then there's the Ohio State going first, where Florida State loses just to have Texas in. See, I think if, as I said, let me go back here. If this is going to happen, who they put in? Who are they going to put in? It's a tricky situation because you can have Georgia here. You're going to either knock out one of these 2 teams, or you're going to put Florida State down. And I think that's what's going to really be tricky here for this college football week. And we'll keep you posted.